This week, the Habagat brought heavy rains and triggered floods in parts of Luzon and Western Visayas. Authorities race to restore services as communities begin to deal with the aftermath. Meanwhile, former police officer Orly Guteza recants his earlier testimony, raising questions into the ongoing investigation. In the Senate, Vice President Sara Duterte's impeachment trial continues, with the prosecution pressed on its allegations and the issue of confidential funds taking center stage. And in Zamboanga City, the Ateneo de Zamboanga school shooting renews questions on school security and student safety. Also this week, higher fuel prices continue to hit commuters and drivers as transport groups warn of another possible strike. The latest weather forecast as the Habagat remains a major factor in conditions across the country. And the nation remembers Ninoy Aquino 43 years after his assassination, with family and supporters paying tribute to his legacy.
From the Philippines, this is Top Stories with 30 Baudin.
The southwest monsoon brought heavy rains and widespread flooding across Luzon last week and into the early days of this week, with millions affected and dozens of communities now under a state of calamity. As of Friday, August 21, the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council says 88 cities and municipalities have declared a state of calamity following the combined impact of Typhoon Luis and Maymay and the Habagat. At least 29 people have died, 19 are injured, and 3 remain missing. The government says some 6.6 million people have been affected, with more than 52,000 still in evacuation centers. More than 2,000 homes have been damaged, while infrastructure and agricultural losses continue to mount. The scale of the rain became clear on Monday, August 17, when Pagasa recorded more than 201 millimeters of rain in Quezon City in just 6 hours. Nearly 139 millimeters of that rain fell in only 2 hours, roughly a week's worth of rain for the area. The downpour sent floodwaters rising across Metro Manila, submerging roads, homes, and businesses. By August 19, more than 600 families in Malabon and Valenzuela had evacuated, while 17 barangay in Laguna remained flooded. In Bulacan, flooding persisted through Thursday, August 20, with all 29 barangays of Kalumpit still underwater. The province has now declared a state of calamity, allowing local authorities to access emergency funds and speed up relief operations. Bataan followed, declaring a province-wide state of calamity on Thursday after extensive damage from storms and the Habagat. And the flooding is taking a heavy toll on farmers. In Oriental Mindoro, authorities reported Friday that agricultural damage had already reached 102 million pesos. Several earth dikes and road dike along the Mag-asawang Tubig River were damaged or washed away, while 17 landslides were reported across the province. In Occidental Mindoro, a road dike collapsed this week along the Pagbahan River, putting thousands of hectares of rice fields at risk and cutting off more than 2,000 residents in Mangyan communities. That damage is also raising questions about flood control projects. Residents in Sablayan say flood control structures built along the Amnay River in 2024 collapsed under the force of the water, allowing floodwaters to surge into homes and farmlands. Local officials are now calling for an investigation and for the damaged infrastructures to be repaired and reinforced. Meanwhile, the floodwaters are bringing another threat. In Manila, health officials reported an increase in leptospirosis cases on August 19, with 8 cases logged in a single day. The disease can spread through floodwater contaminated by infected animal urine, and officials warn cases could continue to rise after weeks of flooding. The government says 1 billion pesos in assistance has so far been provided as evacuees and affected communities begin the long recovery. For now, authorities are urging residents to stay out of floodwaters and avoid swollen rivers and streams and continue monitoring official weather updates. Because even as floodwaters begin to recede in some areas, the full cost of this week's habagat is only now coming into view. And as flood waters begin to recede, the government is now looking at how to prevent the next major downpour from bringing the same kind of flooding. President Marcos met with disaster and infrastructure officials on Wednesday, August 19, as the government pushes for long-term flood control solutions. One proposal, underground rain catchment systems designed to store large amounts of water before drainage networks become overwhelmed. MMDA Chairman Roman Duarte says a Dutch company is conducting a feasibility study and has identified 30 potential locations for catchment areas and other nature-based solutions. One proposal site is near Camp Aguinaldo, where officials say a deep underground catchment could help protect areas along EDSA from flooding. The government says all 73 pumping stations in Metro Manila are currently operational, while dredging and other flood control work continue. But the recent floods are also putting existing projects under scrutiny, with structures in Occidental and Oriental Mindoro damaged or destroyed by the monsoon. The challenge now, authorities say, is not just to pump water out, but to find ways to keep extreme rainfall from overwhelming the system in the first place. A dramatic reversal this week in the flood control corruption investigation. A key witness who once accused former House Speaker Martin Romualdez of receiving cash deliveries is now taking those accusations back. Retired Marine Orly Guteza now says he had no personal knowledge of the alleged cash deliveries, and he is making a new accusation against two lawmakers who he says were behind his original testimony. Orly Guteza had been one of the most talked about witnesses in the Senate's flood control investigation. He told lawmakers that he delivered suitcases filled with cash to the residence of then House Speaker Martin Romualdez. Guteza also linked those alleged deliveries to former lawmaker Zaldico and the wider corruption scandal involving billions of pesos in flood control projects. But now, Guteza is changing his story. In a sworn affidavit dated August 13th, he says he did not personally witness or have personal knowledge of the alleged cash deliveries, and he makes another serious claim. Guteza now alleges that Senator Rodante Marcoleta and former Representative Mike Defensor instructed or pressured him to make the accusations against Romualdez. Those are Guteza's new claims, and they have not been established as fact. Marcoleta and Defensor have yet to have those allegations proven against them. For Romualdez's camp, the recantation could be significant. His lawyers are now using Guteza's new affidavit to challenge the credibility of the allegations against the former speaker. But the ombudsman says the investigation will go on. The anti-graft body says Guteza's recantation does not derail its case because there are 28 other witnesses who can provide information on the matter. The ombudsman also says recantations in high-profile cases can be a possible pressure tactic, and that the search for the truth will not depend on one witness. The Senate Blue Ribbon Committee, for its part, says it will leave the matter to the ombudsman. The Senate Impeachment Court was forced to pause the proceedings this week as heavy rains and flooding from the southwest monsoon disrupted the trial of Vice President Sara Duterte. But before the weather interrupted the proceedings, the prosecution presented one of its most important witnesses yet, in the case involving hundreds of millions of pesos in confidential funds. Monday, August 17, former Office of the Vice President's Special Disbursing Officer Gina Acosta took the witness stand and was declared a hostile witness by the impeachment court. That allowed prosecutors to use leading questions as they questioned Acosta about the release of 125 million pesos in confidential funds to OVP Security Officer Colonel Raymond Dante La Chica. Acosta testified that Duterte personally instructed her to release the money in December 2022. The prosecution even used an AI-generated visualization to show the physical scale of 125 million pesos in cash. But the day's proceedings were also cut short because of the weather. Tuesday and Wednesday, August 18 and 19, both trial days were cancelled as the southwest monsoon brought heavy rains and the threat of flooding. The cancellations added to delays already caused by lengthy witness testimony. Impeachment court spokesperson Reginald Tunggal said the trial was already 2 to 3 days behind schedule, with only about 6 witnesses completed when the court had expected to be closer to the 9th or 10th witness. The court had allotted 31 trial days for the confidential funds article alone, and by Friday, August 21, Senate leaders were still considering how to make up for lost time. A proposal to move the impeachment trial to the afternoon while Senate plenary sessions are held in the morning was being considered to allow longer trial sessions. But Senate President Sherwin Gatchalian said no schedule change would take effect the following week. The impeachment court has so far used 16 of the 92 days allotted for the trial, with 2 trial days cancelled this week because of the weather. The court has also formally retained the prosecution first format, meaning the House prosecutors will complete their presentation of evidence across the articles of impeachment before the defense takes its turn. For now, the case remains focused on the alleged misuse of 612.5 million pesos in confidential funds from the Office of the Vice President and the Department of Education. And with the trial already facing weather and scheduling delays, the Senate will have to find a way to balance its legislative work with the demands of the impeachment court. Now, let's take a look at the impeachment trial. For 7 weeks, the Senate has been hearing the case against Vice President Sara Duterte, and much of the attention has rightly been on the allegations, including the use of confidential funds and the evidence being presented by the prosecution. But there is another story developing inside the courtroom, the story of the trial itself. Last week, a heated exchange between prosecutor Lorna Capunan and defense lawyer Christine Ferrer turned into one of the most discussed moments of the proceedings. The dispute started over whether a witness should be required to answer questions with a simple yes or no. Capunan then reminded the defense that there are limits to cross-examination and that misleading questions are not allowed. Ferrer responded, "They are allowed." That exchange sparked a public dispute between the two camps, with the defense later arguing that Ferrer was referring to leading questions, which are permitted during cross-examination, rather than misleading questions. The prosecution, however, pointed to the official transcript and argued that Ferrer's words were clear. Even the palace weighed in, warning against misleading questions in the impeachment trial. And presiding officer Francis Escudero warned both sides about public statements and social media posts that could violate the court's rules. Now, none of this is the actual case against the vice president. It does not provide or disprove the allegations of misused confidential funds, but it does raise a question about how we are watching this trial. Are we paying more attention to the lawyers' clashes than to the evidence they are supposed to be presenting? Because while a sharp exchange in court can make for good television, the purpose of an impeachment trial is not to determine who won the latest argument. It is to determine whether the evidence supports the articles of impeachment, and that may be the bigger challenge for the public as this trial continues. There will be more objections for sure, more cross-examinations, and more legal arguments, and, very likely, more moments that can go viral. But beyond the clashes, the sass, and the sound bites, the question that matters most is much simpler. What does the evidence actually show? That is what the Senate impeachment court will eventually have to answer, and that is what we, as viewers, should be watching for. In other news, 4 days after a deadly shooting at a school in Zamboanga City, students and families are beginning to deal with the aftermath as authorities continue to investigate how a firearm entered a school and what may have led to the attack. The shooting happened Tuesday morning, August 18, inside the junior high school building of Ateneo de Zamboanga University. 2 people died in the incident, including the student suspected of carrying out the attack. Other people were also injured as students and staff rushed to safety. Authorities are still working to establish the full circumstances of the shooting. The National Bureau of Investigation has opened its own investigation while police continue to look into how firearms were brought into the school. One of the firearms has been confirmed to have been issued to a Bureau of Customs officer. But beyond the investigation, the focus now is also on the students who have to return to a place where they experienced trauma. Ateneo de Zamboanga says it has provided psychosocial support to about 180 people following the shooting. The school has also suspended classes, with a gradual return to school planned for students in the coming days. For some students, the return may not simply mean going back to class. It may also mean returning to a campus associated with fear, loss, and trauma. The shooting has also raised questions beyond the school's own security measures. The Department of the Interior and local government is again calling for stronger gun laws, while authorities examine how a student was able to access firearms. And there is another part of the story that authorities are urging the public to consider. What happens after violence is captured on camera? Videos of the shooting have circulated online. The Philippine National Police has ordered efforts to take down such material, while the Cybercrime Investigation and Coordinating Center has asked the public not to repost or share it. The Kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas, in its August 18 statement, called on media organizations, journalists, and content creators and the public to put human dignity and the rights of minors ahead of views, likes, or the race to break news. That means not identifying children involved in the incident, protecting the privacy of grieving families, and refraining from graphic or intrusive material. For the Ateneo de Zamboanga community, the days ahead will be about more than an investigation. They will also be about recovery, about restoring a sense of safety, and about making sure that schools remain places where children can learn, grow, and feel safe. For drivers, the higher diesel costs are another blow to already tight operating margins. Transport Group Manibela has been pushing for a fare increase as drivers and operators struggle for rising fuel costs. The group had earlier postponed a transport strike set for August 10 to 12 after the government promised to address their concern. But on Friday, August 21, Manibela Chairman Marval Buena warned that they could still push through with the postponed strike if the government fails to provide a solution. That warning comes as motorists face another possible fuel price increase next week. Based on the first 4 trading days of the week, diesel could go up by about 2 pesos and 23 centavos per liter, gasoline by 1 peso and 40 centavos, and kerosene by 1 peso and 51 centavos. The government has already increased the fuel discount for public utility vehicles to 12 pesos per liter from 10 pesos as it tries to ease the impact of higher fuel costs. But for commuters, the problem is that help for drivers could still come with a cost. A higher fare would mean more expense for passengers, while keeping fares unchanged could further squeeze the income of drivers. And if fuel prices rise again next week, the pressure on both sides could intensify. For the weather, the southwest monsoon or Habagat continues to bring rainy weather to parts of Luzon through the weekend. For Saturday, August 22, cloudy skies with scattered rain showers and thunderstorms are expected over the Ilocos region, Batanes, Babuyan Islands, and Zambales due to Habagat. Metro Manila and most other areas may see partly cloudy to cloudy skies with isolated rain showers or thunderstorms, particularly in the afternoon and evening. By Sunday, August 23, Pagasa expects the rainy conditions to expand. Cloudy skies with scattered rains and thunderstorms are forecast over Metro Manila, northern and central Luzon, Calabarzon, and parts of Mimaropa, while most of the rest of the country may experience isolated showers or thunderstorms. And on Monday, August 24, the Habagat is expected to continue affecting Ilocos region, Zambales, Bataan, and Occidental Mindoro, with scattered rains and thunderstorms. Elsewhere, partly cloudy to cloudy skies with isolated rain showers or thunderstorms are expected, especially in the afternoon or evening. With rainfall possibly becoming heavy in some areas, residents in flood and landslide-prone areas are advised to stay alert and continue to monitor latest Pag-asa weather advisories. 43 years after his assassination, the memory of former Senator Benigno Ninoy Aquino Jr. continues to be remembered. Family, friends, and supporters gathered at the Manila Memorial Park in Parañaque yesterday to mark Aquino's 43rd death anniversary. Aquino's grandchildren said they are humbled to see the tradition of remembering their grandfather continue with the next generation. His daughter, Balsi Aquino Cruz, also had a simple message that Filipinos should not forget his sacrifice and what happened during martial law. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. meanwhile said Ninoy's memory reminds Filipinos of the courage to stand by their convictions. He called on the public to acknowledge the past and draw from it the resolve to safeguard freedom, strengthen institutions, and promote national unity. But for some of Ninoy supporters, remembering his legacy should go beyond words. They say it should also mean continuing the fight against corruption and for good governance and democracy. And that's a look at this week's top stories, from the continuing impact of the Habagat to developments in the Senate impeachment trial, the Guteza recantation, and the tragedy in Zamboanga City. These are the stories that shaped the week. I'm 30 Baudin. Thank you for listening. Join us again next week for the stories that matter and the context beyond the headlines. Good day.